All right, welcome to our exam-focused explainer on the markets. If you're getting ready for your Edexcel Business AS level exams, specifically Unit 1.3.1, then you are in exactly the right place. We're going to break down everything you need to know to absolutely nail it. So here's the plan. We've got 5 key sections to get through. We'll start with the real basics. What even is a market? Then we'll get into the difference between mass and niche markets, crunch some of the numbers, figure out why markets change so fast, and wrap up with the huge topic of online shopping. Right, let's dive in. First things first, we've got to lay the foundations. You can't really analyze a market until you've got a rock-solid definition of what a market is and what marketing's all about. So, when you see a picture like this, you immediately think market, right? A physical place with stalls and people buying and selling, and you're not wrong. But for your course, you need to think much, much bigger. Today, a market is simply any place where buyers and sellers get together to trade. That could be a website like eBay, it could be over the phone, or even in the massive, invisible financial markets where currencies are traded 24/7. And wow, that term market can cover a whole lot of ground. You've got the market for things you buy every week, like food and cosmetics. Then there are markets for services, like getting a haircut. But it also scales up to these huge, complex systems, like the housing market, the global market for oil, and the financial markets. The key takeaway for you is that any of these could pop up in an exam question, so you've got to be flexible. Now, this is one of those definitions you just have to know. It's not just about ads or making a sale. The official definition is way smarter. Look at those 3 key words: identifying what customers want, anticipating what they'll want next, and satisfying those needs. But don't you dare forget that last word, profitably. That's the whole ballgame. A business has to do all that and still make money. Markets almost never stand still. They're what we call dynamic. They're constantly changing. And this graph? It's a perfect illustration. Look at the market for domestic flights in China. It was tiny in 1980, and then boom, exponential growth. This didn't happen by magic. It was driven by real-world factors like people getting richer, the government easing up on rules, and a huge increase in business travel. Okay, don't tune out for the maths bit because you will definitely be asked to do this. Calculating percentage change is a fundamental skill for this exam. Just lock the formula in your brain. Find the difference between the new and old number, divide it by the original number, and then times it by 100. Let's try it. So if we plunk in the numbers from that graph, we take the 2016 figure, subtract the 1980 figure to get the difference. Then we divide that by the original 1980 number, multiply by 100, and we get this absolutely mind-blowing number, 18,980% growth. Seriously, practice this calculation. It's easy marks if you know how. So we know what a market is. Now let's talk about the 2 main ways a business can decide to tackle it. Are they going to go broad and target everyone in a mass market, or go narrow and focus on a specific niche? This is a brilliant slide for revision. It puts the 2 concepts side by side. Think of a mass market, like Coca-Cola. They sell basically the same thing to billions of people. This means they can make it really cheap per can, that's economies of scale, but the competition is ferocious. A niche market is the total opposite. It's about finding a small group with very specific needs, which lets you charge more and hopefully fly under the radar of the big players. Now, case studies are where these ideas really click. Let's look at Drybar. The hair salon industry is ridiculously competitive, right? There's one on every corner. But Drybar found a way to not just survive, but to absolutely thrive by picking a very clever niche. So what's their secret? They are laser-focused. They do one thing and one thing only: blowouts. No cuts, no color. By specializing, they aim to be the absolute best at it. They created this cool, fun, bar-like vibe, and they targeted a very specific customer, someone who wants a fantastic blowout but doesn't want to pay the full price of a cut and color at a high-end salon. It's a textbook niche strategy. Okay, everyone lean in, because this is probably the single most important piece of exam advice you're going to get. To get the top marks, you have to show application. That means you can't just define what a niche market is. You have to use the details from the case study in your answer. You have to say, Drybar is a niche business because they focus only on blowouts, using the actual information they give you. All right, let's put that advice into practice. Pause for a moment and think how you'd structure an answer to these. For question 1, you'd define a niche market and then immediately apply it, saying, Drybar targets a small segment of the wider salon market. For question 2, a disadvantage? Well, what if a huge salon chain decides to offer cheap blowouts as a loss leader? Drybar could get squeezed out. They've put all their eggs in one basket, which is a classic risk for a niche business.
Okay, time to get back to the numbers. A business can't just operate on feelings. It needs hard data to figure out where it stands. And two of the most critical metrics are market size and market share. So, how big is a market? Well, there are two ways to measure it. You can measure it by value, which is simply the total amount of money spent, or you can measure it by volume, which is the total number of items sold. It's really important to check which one the case study is talking about. The fast food market is measured in dollars, but the Chinese air travel market was measured in the number of passengers. And here is another formula that you absolutely have to know off by heart: market share. It's a simple calculation that tells you what slice of the total market pie your business has. It's the number one way to see how you're doing against your competitors. This chart makes that idea crystal clear. You can see in a split second that Samsung is the market leader with the biggest slice. But here's the other really interesting thing. Look at that massive chunk labeled others. At almost 45%, it tells us that while there are a few big fish, this market is also packed with tons of smaller brands all fighting for a piece of the action. Right, onto a really critical concept. Markets are dynamic. That's just a business term for the fact that they are always changing. New tech, new trends, new laws. And this constant change creates huge opportunities for some and is a massive threat to others. You have to adapt or you risk disappearing. And if you ever need a cautionary tale for your exam, Kodak is the one. For decades, these guys were photography. They were a giant, but they were so married to their old business of selling film that they completely fumbled the shift to digital photography. Their failure to adapt to that dynamic market change didn't just hurt them, it literally drove them into liquidation. Speaking of dynamic shifts, there is probably no bigger change in our lifetimes than the explosion of online retailing, or e-tailing. It has fundamentally rewritten the rules for how we shop and how businesses have to operate. I mean, even a market as basic as buying groceries has been completely shaken up. Huge retailers like Woolworths have had to pour millions and millions into building websites, massive warehouses, and entire fleets of delivery trucks. Why? Because we, the customers, now expect the convenience of being able to do our weekly shop from the sofa. If you don't offer it, you lose. And for the businesses that get it right, the benefits are massive. Think about it. You can slash your overheads. No expensive rent on high street stores. Your market is suddenly global, not just local. You're open for business 24/7, and maybe the most powerful benefit of all, you can gather incredible amounts of data on your customers, which you can use for super targeted marketing. So, to wrap everything up, here's a final thought, phrased as a typical exam question. The command word here is assess, which is your cue to build a balanced argument. You need to talk about the pros and the cons. So for the benefits, you'd talk about everything we just mentioned, reaching more customers, data, and so on. But for the drawbacks, you have to consider the other side. Think about the colossal cost of the technology in warehouses, the logistical nightmare of picking fresh food and managing returns. A top-grade answer always looks at both sides. Get that balance right, and you are well on your way. Good luck.